She told me, "It's just work with my ex. You'll have to trust me." I nodded quietly, packed my things, and signed my Dubai offer before she even took off. By the time her plane landed, I was already gone, from the country and from the relationship. Looking back now, I can see that the warning signs had been there for months. I'd just been too comfortable, too attached to our routine, to see them clearly. I met Brooke 4 years ago at a wine tasting in Portland's Pearl District, and from the moment we talked, I thought I'd found my person. Someone who valued thoughtful conversation, genuine connection, and shared ambitions. I was 29 at the time, working as a software quality assurance manager for a tech consulting firm. I believed I was building a solid foundation for a stable, meaningful future together. Brooke, meanwhile, had just climbed from being a junior marketing associate to becoming the brand strategy director at a prestigious digital marketing agency. It was an impressive promotion that required her to travel frequently for week-long strategy summits and client immersion sessions. I was genuinely proud of her success, excited even, and I made peace with her increasingly busy schedule. We coordinated our lives around her demanding projects because I wanted to support her. What I didn't anticipate, though, was that her brand development team included Cameron, her ex-boyfriend from college and grad school. They'd dated for 5 years before amicably ending things when their careers took them in different directions. For months, I'd been declining a senior technical director position with a Fortune 500 company in Dubai, a job that would have quadrupled my responsibilities and increased my salary by nearly 70%. My corporate headhunter kept calling, but each time I politely explained that I wanted to stay here and build a life with Brooke. I thought what we were creating together mattered more than any international career move. At first, the changes in her behavior were subtle, easy to rationalize as stress or temporary adjustment. Her 3-day conferences turned into 10-day intensive workshops, which she said were essential for developing comprehensive brand strategies. Our regular evening FaceTime calls during her trips slowly faded into short, generic text updates about productive meetings and tight deadlines. Whenever I tried to ask simple questions, like when she'd be back or how the project was going, she became defensive. She accused me of being possessive, and said her work required her complete focus and creative freedom. Then Cameron's name started coming up a lot. She'd mention how his strategic insights impressed clients, how his creative vision aligned with hers, how their collaborative process was producing exceptional results. She spoke about him differently, with a spark that made my stomach twist, but I kept telling myself it was just professional enthusiasm. Successful teamwork can feel exciting, I reasoned. But the communication gaps grew worse. Entire days passed without a word from her. When I finally reached her, she sounded distracted, impatient, as if my calls were intruding on something more important. The breaking point came after Brooke's 12-day brand innovation retreat in Austin, another project with Cameron as her lead strategist. That Sunday, I decided to finally talk about the Dubai offer over brunch at our favorite farm-to-table spot in Hawthorne. I wanted to show her that I was still putting our relationship first. I told her the headhunter had been insistent, that the job came with a huge raise and an opportunity to oversee international operations. Instead of the thoughtful conversation I expected, Brooke's reaction blindsided me. Her face flushed with anger. "You're deliberately undermining my professional momentum," she snapped, setting her coffee cup down so hard nearby diners turned to look. "Industry leaders are finally recognizing my strategic vision and leadership potential, and you want to drag me away from everything I've worked to build." I stayed calm and suggested that we could make it work long distance, or even explore career opportunities for her in Dubai's fast-growing digital market. I thought I was being reasonable, but she shot back immediately, her tone sharp. "That's the most antiquated thinking I've ever heard from you. You're being possessive and completely unrealistic about how international business actually works." The argument escalated when she revealed she'd been chosen to lead a month-long rebranding campaign for a major tech startup in San Francisco, a project she called career-defining. Then she added almost pointedly, "Cameron will serve as my co-lead strategist and creative partner." She said it like she was testing my reaction. Then she added, "This is exactly the kind of collaborative opportunity that separates serious professionals from people who think geography should determine career decisions." I felt something cold settle inside me. It wasn't jealousy, it was clarity. She wasn't trying to have a discussion. She was framing my concerns about our relationship as insecurities. "If you cannot trust my professional judgment and respect my collaborative relationship with Cameron," she continued, in a tone that sounded rehearsed, "then you need to address your own emotional limitations." Because I refused to sacrifice my career trajectory for anyone's insecurity issues. The way she said anyone's insecurity issues told me everything. She'd already rewritten the story in her mind. I wasn't a partner expressing concern. I was an obstacle. Her defense of Cameron's importance stood in stark contrast to how easily she dismissed my own opportunities. To her, my Dubai offer was optional, but her ex's involvement in her career was essential. Something shifted in me right then. It wasn't anger or heartbreak. It was a calm, crystalline moment of realization. I finally saw that she'd been choosing Cameron's comfort over our relationship's health for months, and she'd been reframing my pain as a flaw that she didn't need to consider. So instead of arguing, I simply nodded. "You're absolutely right," I said, finishing my coffee. "If working closely with Cameron is non-negotiable, then I should respect that and stop questioning decisions you've already made." She looked almost disappointed, as if she'd expected me to fight or break down so she could cast herself as the reasonable one. 18 hours later, I called my headhunter and officially accepted the Dubai role. I even asked for an accelerated relocation, 3 weeks. Once I stopped trying to accommodate someone who clearly saw me as optional, everything felt inevitable. Over the next 16 days, I threw myself into planning the move with the same precision I used at work. I finalized my visa paperwork, researched luxury apartments in Dubai's Business Bay, hired international movers, gave proper notice to my employer, and told no one about my plans. What surprised me most was how easy it was to keep up appearances. We still went on our Tuesday date nights, weekend hikes, even casual dinners where I helped her polish her San Francisco presentations. She had no idea I was leaving. I didn't feel the need to create drama. I'd already accepted the truth that she'd chosen her priorities, and I was no longer one of them. Every night while she reviewed slides or texted Cameron about collaboration logistics, I quietly sorted through shipping lists and international banking forms. For the first time in months, I felt free. I was choosing my own path, my own peace, instead of waiting to be chosen by someone who no longer saw my worth. 17 days after that restaurant conversation, Brooke used her spare key to come by my apartment. She froze in the doorway when she saw the half-packed suitcases, the labeled boxes, the shipping crates lined neatly across the living room. Her face went from confusion to full disbelief. "What the hell is all this?" she demanded, gesturing at the organized chaos around her. I calmly folded another shirt into a vacuum-sealed bag and said matter-of-factly, "I accepted the Dubai position. I'm leaving for the Middle East in exactly 6 days," I finished. Her emotional response came in waves, each one more desperate than the last. It was almost predictable. First came disbelief. "You can't be serious about this," she said, her voice trembling. "You hate international travel. You've never even mentioned wanting to live abroad." Then came fury. "This is absolutely insane. You're destroying 4 years together over some ridiculous career opportunity that you'll probably hate within 6 months." And finally, desperate bargaining. "We need to resolve this crisis together through honest communication. I never intended for you to actually relocate internationally." When I said those things about Cameron, I cut her off gently but firmly. "You explicitly declared that your work arrangements with him were completely non-negotiable. You made it clear that questioning your professional decisions represented emotional limitations on my part," I said, sealing another shipping container. "So I'm simply honoring your stated preferences while making my own strategic career decision." The room fell into silence. The only sound was the slow rip of packing tape as she processed the logical finality of what I just said. That's when she broke. Completely. Tears streamed down her face as the words spilled out in a shaking, breathless confession. Cameron and I, we became physically intimate during the Austin retreat, she said. 3 times, once in his hotel suite after team drinks, and twice more during what were supposed to be breakfast meetings. I've been consumed with guilt, trying to convince myself it meant nothing, but I can't pretend anymore. Her confession hung in the air like something alive, heavy, suffocating. It confirmed what some quiet part of me had known all along but refused to admit. I need you to return my apartment key and leave my premises, I said, my voice steady despite the emotional earthquake she just triggered. Even as she cried, pleading to explain everything if I'd just listen, I kept packing, methodical, silent, focused. I'd already decided. The betrayal hurt, but what surprised me most was the sense of relief. Finally, I had the confirmation I'd been subconsciously waiting for, proof that my instincts hadn't been paranoia, but reality. Over the next 5 days, Brooke tried to reach me 97 times. 97. She sent long texts that shifted between tearful apologies, defensive justifications, and desperate promises to resign from her position, even to move to Dubai, if that's what it took to rebuild us. I didn't respond. Not once. I knew that engaging would only give her another chance to twist the story, to paint my decision as impulsive, emotional, or unfair. Silence, I realized, was the only language that couldn't be manipulated. My longtime friend Jason told me I was being cruel, that 4 years together deserved at least a conversation. Everyone makes mistakes, he said. You owe her that much. My older sister took a softer stance. She said Brooke's confession showed genuine remorse, that maybe I should at least listen. But I'd already listened, for months, while she gaslit me into doubting my own instincts. I'd listened when she called my questions possessive. I'd listened when she turned her boundaries into my supposed flaws. Her affair wasn't some impulsive mistake. It was a series of deliberate decisions, followed by calculated deception when she realized she might lose the comfort of having me waiting at home. On the morning of my departure, Brooke somehow got my flight details and called from Portland International Airport. Her voice was trembling, frantic. Please, she said, just 15 minutes. Face to face. We can work through this if you just listen. What happened with Cameron, it got out of control. But we can fix this. We can fix us. I was already seated in the Emirates business class lounge, watching planes taxi across the runways. For the first time in months, I felt calm, peaceful. You deliberately chose Cameron over our relationship, I told her quietly. You chose him over respect, over compromise. And honestly, I'm grateful. Your choice freed me. It forced me to finally prioritize my own worth, to stop accommodating someone who treated me like a convenience instead of a partner. There was silence on the line. Then, through quiet sobs, she whispered, I hope you find what you're looking for in Dubai, because you're throwing away everything real we built together. But that was just it. She still didn't understand. What we'd built wasn't real if it required me to accept being treated as optional. 4 weeks into my Dubai assignment, I'd fully adapted. My responsibilities now spanned 9 international markets. I was living in a modern high-rise in Marina Walk with panoramic views of the Arabian Gulf. My days were spent collaborating with brilliant engineers from over 20 different countries. The transition didn't feel jarring at all. It felt right, like I'd finally aligned my environment with my true capabilities, instead of limiting myself to fit someone else's comfort zone. Brooke, meanwhile, had been desperately trying to reach me through mutual friends and social media. One evening, my college friend Rachel called. She quit her job, Rachel said quietly. She's been basically housebound for a month. She's not doing well. Rachel sounded like she expected sympathy, maybe even regret. But I didn't feel either. I'm not responsible for the consequences of her choices, I told her. She wasn't impulsive. She betrayed, deceived, and then tried to control the damage when she lost control of the narrative. A few weeks later, I learned something that made the entire situation even more pathetic than I could have imagined. Cameron, the man she'd risked everything for, had been engaged for over 8 months. His wedding was scheduled for the following spring, with save-the-date cards already sent to colleagues. Her Austin retreat affair wasn't rekindled love. It was a series of meaningless hotel room encounters with someone who never intended to be with her, someone who viewed her as a convenient distraction during a business trip. She destroyed a 4-year relationship for absolutely nothing. Not even passion, just temporary validation from a man who'd already chosen someone else. The irony was almost poetic. She demanded unconditional trust for a professional partnership that wasn't professional at all, while the man she defended so fiercely treated her as disposable. Meanwhile, my department director called me in for a private meeting. He told me that my performance metrics had already surpassed every benchmark, and that executive leadership was discussing expanded regional responsibilities, opportunities that would have been impossible if I'd stayed in Portland. It hit me then. By losing her, I hadn't just freed myself emotionally. I'd freed my entire future. 7 weeks after relocating, I'd built a new rhythm. I started meeting people again. Remarkable women who reminded me what respect actually looked like. There was Elena, a German renewable energy consultant who spoke 4 languages and had fascinating insights on sustainable infrastructure. Sophie, an Australian financial analyst who loved problem solving and had traveled across Southeast Asia. And Astrid, a Swedish telecommunications specialist whose dry humor made every conversation feel effortless. None of these connections turned serious, but they didn't need to. What mattered was realizing how wide the world really was, and how small I'd made mine trying to keep someone who didn't value me. Each of these women showed me something simple yet profound: respect, interest, emotional maturity. No guilt trips, no manipulation, just connection. The contrast was staggering. I couldn't believe I'd ever convinced myself that emotional management and constant compromise were normal parts of love. A few weeks later, my director met with me again. "Your results have been exceptional," he said. "Executive leadership is considering you for the new Chief Technology Officer position for the Middle East and North Africa Division." The CTO role. It would mean overseeing technical operations across 15 countries, managing teams in 6 time zones, and developing cutting-edge software solutions for Fortune 500 clients. The salary increase alone was over 200% of what I made in Portland. But more than that, it was the kind of intellectual challenge I'd always dreamed of. And I knew, with complete certainty, that it never would have happened if I'd stayed behind, compromising my growth to accommodate someone who made me feel small. I was now working with some of the most innovative minds in international technology development when Brooke found one last way to reach me. She sent a final message through a mutual friend's LinkedIn account, probably because I'd already blocked her on every other platform. "I hope Dubai gives you everything you thought I couldn't. I hope destroying 4 years was worth your precious career advancement. I hope you're satisfied with choosing money over love." Reading it, I realized she still fundamentally misunderstood what had really happened between us. I hadn't chosen career advancement over love. I'd chosen self-respect over someone who had repeatedly shown me that I was negotiable, while her past relationship was somehow sacred territory. I'd stopped minimizing my own value just to accommodate someone who refused reasonable boundaries. I'd stopped ignoring obvious warning signs simply because our routine was comfortable and familiar. And I'd stopped allowing someone to twist my legitimate expectations into supposed personal flaws, things I needed to work on, instead of her taking responsibility for her own behavior. The relationship hadn't ended because I valued money more than love. It ended because she valued her ex-boyfriend more than fidelity, honesty, or basic respect for the person she claimed to be building a future with. Sure, I would have preferred a different outcome. That Brooke had maintained basic relationship boundaries, that we could have faced our respective career paths through honest communication and mutual compromise. But that wasn't the reality she chose to create. I finally learned to accept exactly who she had revealed herself to be, not through her words, but through her actions. Someone who would consistently put her ex-boyfriend's comfort above my legitimate concerns. Someone who would reframe my perfectly reasonable expectations as character defects that supposedly required therapy, instead of recognizing that what needed changing was her own behavior. 6 months later, Jason told me Brooke had moved back to her hometown in Ohio. She was living with her parents, going to therapy, and trying to rebuild her professional reputation after abruptly abandoning what had once been a promising career, all for what she now apparently realized were meaningless physical encounters that destroyed everything stable in her life. Meanwhile, I'd been promoted ahead of schedule to Regional Technology Director and was now exploring permanent residency in the UAE. And somewhere between those long Dubai nights and bright early mornings, I discovered something I never expected. That sometimes the most devastating betrayals become the very thing that transforms your life for the better. Her betrayal forced me to choose myself, to stop accepting treatment that made me feel optional in my own relationship. That choice became the doorway to everything that followed. The professional opportunities, the international experiences, the growth I never would have reached if I'd kept prioritizing someone else's comfort over my own worth and potential. Oh,